were not in the know. So after this dinner, a few days later, they announced this, and they came out with the details already. Okay, so Malaysia actually was predetermined in August, 6, July, end of July '62.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sabah Matters podcast brought to you by Daily Express, where we bring experts from all across different fields to talk about what we love about Sabah, why Sabah really matters to the world and to Malaysia. Today we have none other than a literary giant, someone that has published numerous articles and books all on Sabah, always furthering the Sabah cause. I have another than with me, Datuk Johan Arifin, also under his pen name, if you know him, Datuk Joe Samad as well, the author recently of
Thank
the
you
book.
very much.
Recently, author of the book, Sabah's Rocky Road to Malaysia, Events That Shape Sabah's Political and Economic Realities. Datuk, thank you for coming on today. Let's just start here. Why do all this kind of work? Why put so much mental energy in writing so much about Sabah and furthering Sabah's cause? What inspires you?
Thank you, Adi, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to talk about it. I think little is known about Sabah actually, and especially with Peninsula Malaysians. Although we call ourselves Malaysians, I think there is a lack of knowledge still about the Borneo states, especially Sabah. People always tend to ask me about why is our politics like this, the upheaval, the turnaround, and all that, but not so much about our state culture, the people, customs, and so on. So I feel like it's my mission to correct the perspective about Sabah as people, as one culture, as people have stories to tell, the world, not only in Malaysia. So I embark on writing Sabah-centric articles and books. I have 3 books under my belt now, and also talk about it on various podcasts or YouTube about Sabah issues. A lot of people are interested in it. It's just that maybe they don't have the time to sit down and actually talk to Sabahan face to face. And I find it's my time to go to KL. My time in the sense I make my time to go there and engage with various organizations and people and talk about Sabah, the Sabah issues, and why we are where we are or why we are like that.
What's the reception usually like when you talk to people in West Malaysia, when you talk about Sabah?
It has been quite responsive. I'm quite surprised that none of them is negative in any way. They just want to understand certain issues about Sabah. I mean, early days, how I got started is I became a member of G25. This is a group of prominent civil servants based in Kuala Lumpur who are undertaken the task of highlighting issues in Malaysia, but particularly in Malaya, and and they became prominent and they covered well by the media who love them and all that. So I engaged them and brought a person, Zainal Ajaiman. I think many people know, who's one of the earlier pioneers who used to talk about Malaysia Agreement in open and highlighted this subject more frequently than any other person from the historical perspective. And when I brought him there, people became interested in the Malaysia Agreement 1963, and they actually asked us, okay, we support you, we agree with you, but what do you want from us? That question taken me aback because we were not prepared. So Zainal just came out with a bunch of books. Say, okay, I authored this book, it's for sale, and please read it. But I mean, we were not prepared in the sense, this is our demands, like today 40% revenue and all that. We were not prepared in that sense, but it was good to bridge the gap in the first instance with our counterparts across the South China Sea. But one of the issues they brought up also, why do we need passport to go to your state? No, I don't like it. And I can understand him. I mean, he thinks it's a Malaysian per se, of course, and then why does he need passport to go to Sabah and Sarawak? Of course, nowadays you can use the IC. In those days, you still need to bring a passport. So we exchange thoughts, issues, and gradually, my interaction with them picked up and all that. And I joined many other podcasts and meetings and launches and so on, and talk more about Sabah. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about your latest book for
Yeah.
a bit here, right? You've made particular claims and narratives that runs a bit counter to the mainstream understanding of how the federation was formed. That for Tengku at the time, he was worried about the communist elements here and there. But you've made the claims that it may be otherwise. Can you talk about that as well?
Especially what aspect?
The reason why Tengku approached Sabah and Sarawak to form the federation.
Yeah, I mean, I've read many versions of how Malaysia was formed. I have to tell you that I spent a lot of time on research. Okay, I'm not talking on top of my head. And I've been to the British archives. I've seen the files which is referred to. And my so-called Bible in talking or reading about the Malaysia Agreement is A.J. Stockwell, Professor A.J. Stockwell, who wrote this series number 8 on Malaysia. And I use that as a basis for my research. And there's so many versions of Tengku thoughts on Malaysia. And Tengku never wrote anything about MA63. He never wrote anything about the formation of Malaysia. Okay, if you can find a book that he wrote himself about Malaysia, please let me know, because people wrote autobiography about him. I think the main person who wrote about the formation of Malaysia in negotiations preceding Malaysia in 1963 was Tan Sri Ghazali Shafi. So I rely more on his book. So the common argument about Tengku is that he wanted the Chinese balance because of Singapore, which is a Chinese majority, and if Malaya and Singapore came together, there would the racial balance would be in the favor of the Chinese. So they need Sabah and Sarawak to balance up the Chinese population. That was the narrative which is still put forward today. All right, but I think that's not the true story. It's one of probably the reasons, but I feel that Malaysia is a forced sovereign nation, and the British Stockwell said also claimed that it is also this force upon us. It was not harmonious decision to join Malaysia. There are a lot of factors. There were external factors like Philippines, Indonesia, who were against the formation of Malaysia. So there are many versions of Tengku thoughts and all that. But like I said, he never wrote anything. So it's all the interpretation of other people that read the surrounding history and messages.
So when it comes to, well, I mean, Malaya has its own interests as well, beyond, I believe, the racial component, right? Because eventually Sabah and Sarawak resources was always sort of in the background of the conversation for a lot of the decision makers over in Malaya. What do you think about the economic contributions that Sabah and Sarawak has made, given the treatment that we've received over the past 60 years, 60 plus years?
Well, I think resources has always been a major issue, not only in Malaysia, but in all over the world. People fight over resources. People go to war over resources, just like we're experiencing now with US and Iran and all that. Behind that is the major issue, underlying issue is oil as a resource, and who controls the oil market. So in Malaysia, there's this idea that Tengku and people there who wants to form Malaysia at that time was after our resources, oil-rich resources. Apart from Brunei, that was already well known as being an oil sultanate, oil country, rich in oil resources. Sabah and Sarawak were still not developed at that time in terms of oil exploration and so on. Okay, you're talking about 1957, right? And oil discoveries in Sabah is 1970s onwards. Although in Sarawak they found oil 1800s and all that, but it's not so developed as what we talk about oil business in today's terms, So there's an argument that Malay was interested in us because of our oil resources. I beg to differ, because from my reading is that it was forced upon us. The whole idea about Malaysia. First, the British wanted Borneo states to merge together, Brunei, North Borneo, Brunei, and Sarawak, and then as a one entity, and then Singapore and Malaya as one entity, and then putting both together as one sovereign nation, Malaysia. So I think reading Tengku is not actually in favor of Malaysia, all right, but it was forced upon him by the British. Resource was not a factor in many of the articles I've seen or read, or in books that I read. But I think one of the, like I said earlier, one of the biggest issues is the racial balance. That was the top of the reason for all of my readings. Resource came later, right?
So when you say it's been forced upon us, the terms and whatever that was discussed, right? Would you say that in a way we never had the chance to fully realize what Sabahans and aspirations were when it came to negotiations and when it came to forming the federation? Because if that's the case, it sounds like we're incomplete when we form together, and we're still incomplete in many ways.
Yeah, it's always difficult to answer in short sentences, but
you have all the time, please.
I guess so many factors came into play. I think my take is that first we were forced upon by the British, who were keen to
just to wash their hands off.
Yeah, to say goodbye to us and us, Tunku Abdul Rahman and all that, to take responsibility. Lee Kuan Yew take responsibility for the whole of that region. But I think what we need to know is that I think the question is always is, was it a fiat accompli? It's a Latin term that we have no choice, basically. And that was the I think conclusion by many people that we didn't have choice. I read Herman's Looping book also. He said virtually we have no choice, and a lot of Sabahan leaders seems to have the same consensus. What choice do we have at that time? The only nations or state that was not in any form a country was Sabah and Sarawak, all right? Because Malay has already got the independence. Singapore, by virtue of self-declaration, All right, they were already considered independent countries. The only outlying states is Sabah and Sarawak in no man's land. So where do we fit in? Do we fit in the Philippines' claim, or do we fit in Indonesians' confrontation claim by external force? So at the end of the day, we basically afraid or comply, like, for follow the Latin term, no choice but to join Malaysia. Yeah.
I want to pick you on this because you rightly said that Singapore by self-determination was in a way a state. Malaya had independence, right? Sabah and Sarawak was in a bit of a morasses of it.
Yeah.
But we had self-governance, right, in August 31st, 1963, right?
Yeah.
And the Malaysian agreement is an agreement between the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, the Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore. So there's this argument going around that this is actually an international treaty and should not give some weight to the argument that Sabah, in a way, was a sovereign nation at a particular point, or is this just more semantics, or is it an argument that we kind of should put to rest, or is it something that we should be focusing a lot of energy on as well?
I think it's a red herring. We focus too much on that so-called self-government, which is only 16 days. So based on my research again and going to the British archives, which I saw the files, actually Sabah and Sarawak, there's not much discussion on Sabah and Sarawak in all the files that I saw. All right, the British more concerned about Malaya and Singapore. They're more concerned about their defense arrangement for the territory. More concerned about the financial part of keeping these colonies alive, and very little is talked about Sabah and Sarawak. So we always magah about our freedom for 16 days or what, and between August 31st and 16th September. But actually, the idea of self-governance wasn't to give us independence. I mean, the word independence and self-government are two different things. So I know I'll be shot by people who think that we were independent nation. We were not. We were not. And the British had no idea at that time that the thoughts about giving Sabah independence. I think one of the issue at Cobbold Commission writings and all that, there was a request for some kind of referendum. And in the files I found, so there was a request. It was registered there in the files, the request for referendum. But the British, if I recall from the papers I've seen, is that they preferred a referendum after Malaysia was formed. All right. So it's kind of, it's like, okay, you already form a nation and you give a referendum to people of Sabah and Sarawak. I mean, if I correctly remember what I saw in the files. So Philippines and Indonesia also wanted the referendum. That's why the United Nations came to visit us to make sure that what we say, whoever's involved in Formation Malaysia is correct in making the decision to say that the people of Sabah and Sarawak wanted to join Malaysia, But if you look at the Cobbold Commission report in Stockwell, there's so many arguments before the final report came out, So if you look at the Cobbold Commission's undertakings and report, there's about 500-600 pages. And everybody, I think, were given the right to speak out, either to meet them publicly, to write to them, to correspond with them about their thoughts about whether Sabah Sarawak should join Malaysia. So there was quite an extensive exercise. I think there's a I know the typical argument of Sabahans that they only managed to reach 4,000 people. It's impossible to go over such a difficult terrain, and in those days, travel wasn't easy, right? So imagine all this bunch of white men in coat and tie with sunglasses going around. I mean, that surely they would not go to the kampongs and the difficult areas. Yeah, but when I read all the files and all that people, all associations actually were given the opportunity to write in their own language or transmit some kind of opinion about Malaysia, right? And when it was all brought together in London at that time, there was an argument between Malay and Tukar Berawang, Stanson Ghazali, Shafi, and so on about the wording of it, right? So basically, when the Cobbold Commission came out, it was a massage document, put together by people who were obliged to their own masters, not actually what the real Sabahans desire. Okay, so it was like a whitewash to me. So whether it's whitewash or not, but generally, I think again coming back, we had no choice.
No, there also wasn't much time in general, right? Like when it came to decolonizing and dismantling of the empire, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
One thing, Adi, I think most important part of this run up to Malaysia, people don't understand. I put in my book and I put it across. It still doesn't get into people's mind. The Malaysia so-called deal is between Tunku Abdul Rahman basically and the British Prime Minister. Now they had dinner together in the Exchequer, which is the Prime Minister's office in UK, and then this is 1962, end of July 1962, 62. Okay, they had this dinner together, and subsequently Lee Kuan Yew came in, and the 31st of August 1962, they came to an agreement about Malaysia. It's written there. So when I went to archives, I would just want to double check whether this is written by Stockwell, just made it up or what. So I saw it in the files actually. In fact, all the points that on the formation of Malaysia has already been agreed between Malaya and the British government. Okay, that's in 62. Okay, and they fixed Malaysia to be born on 16 of August, 16 of September. Sorry, 31st of August 1963. Okay, so that was the agreed date. So they announced it, and it took everybody by surprise, including Fort Stevens and so on, because they were not in the know. So after this dinner, a few days later, they announced this, and they came out with the details already. Okay, so Malaysia actually was predetermined in August, July, end of July 62. Okay, it's predetermined. There are all the terms. You can read it. It's a public document, right? It's in Stockwell's book. It's in the files of the British Archives. So we only focus on 1963, but it's already been decided in 1962. So I have to emphasize, do the research, because Sabahans are still sleeping. Malaysia is already determined in 1962. 63 is just another date where it's officially announced, and then we signed this Malaysia Agreement in 1963. And in the files also, they also could not place where Sabah and Sarawak, this is in the files, okay, the British files, should sit, okay, because they're not a sovereign nation. But finally, in summary, they decided to invite Sabah and Sarawak in because they are the party to this whole agreement. So basically, of course, the argument today, whether we have the right to be there, because we're not a nation, which is an ex-colony. I don't know whether we should call ourselves a state, but it was ex-colony, you know.
But given that it was just decided at that level, did it feel like Tun Fuad, the other leaders, was it more window dressing to just tell the British that, okay, we have the Sabahans and Sarawakins on board? Was it just window dressing?
To me, it's window dressing.
Mhm.
Actually, to make it. You see, the one thing about the British, okay, don't get me wrong, they're very legal-minded people. They're lawyers mostly, okay. They're educated people, right? And then they experience it, and it's administrators. Remember, they colonized the whole world, right? And they managed to administrate all this world, but they're very careful when it comes to writing legal terms. And if you look on the files, a lot of argument about wording, terms, and repercussions, and so they were aware that even they signed an agreement that if there's any repercussions, it will bounce back on them. Okay. Most of the time negatively, right? So they're very careful about the wording. So if you look at all the files on run up to Malaysia agreement, there's all these discussions, about position, but about the law, finance, defense responsibility. They're very careful. It's not like tonight, we decide tomorrow can be Malaysia. It was a long drawn out process. This process started during the Second World War. They already had this idea to divest the colonies, because all the political pressures and war and finance and responsibility and so on. But coming back to the resources thing, Adi, sorry, I forgot to mention when you asked about the resources. Of course, in today's context, after Petroleum Development Act was passed in Parliament in 1974, it can be a PDA, Petroleum Development Act 1974. And today, of course, the highlight is the 40% revenue. Yes, the issue is now focus on resources, okay, especially the 40% now. Oil resources, to me, is quite recent. If you look at all the rumblings, it's only last 10 years we're talking about it, but the Petroleum Development Act 1974 was already there, right? And we never argued about that. We never highlighted that. Only of late, and then of course the 40% revenue. So basically, when things are going well, you have timber, you have other resources. You don't really care about other things, okay? But when your resources dwindling, you're in a tight financial situation, of course you start looking at where's my income, where's my revenue coming. So suddenly you see in the forefront this oil and gas matter, especially with Sarawak, and then with our 40% revenue. Okay, so it is concerning in the sense that all these years now we begin to wake up that actually when we form Malaysia, there is some kind of idea of how resources are to be shared, right? Especially the 40%. I mean, it was written down in the constitution. So what we're bringing up today is to use the legal process to claim back our rights to oil mineral resources, and I think my word of caution is be careful, because this is the only resources we have left. I think in Sabah, apart from minerals and all that, gold, silver, but that one is also is brought up into corruption and mismanagement. We don't have a cohesive policy on mining. Basically anybody can team up with so and so and get a license to Sabah state government and open a mining pit. And what I have to caution is we have to look at Mammoth Copper Mine as as an example, right? We let a copper mine to be open, and now there's the danger that the dam or what will break out, one day because it's not maintained, and then and cause environmental havoc to Sabah. So we have to control this exploitation, in an honest way with ethical standards. Okay, not let politics decide it, and get rich through that, So I'm very concerned about that. When we have all these resources at our hand, we must protect it and manage it properly.
I mean, when looking at Sabah, it really is a story of external powers coming in, exploiting and subjugating the people here. The Bruneians came, the British came, and then you can make the argument that in a lot of ways that the federal government has exploited much of Sabah's resources here, right? And that's one thing about resources. But when it comes, let's talk about status here as well, because we've previously talked several times on the idea of equal partnership, right? And considering how ragged and haphazard the federation was formed, with not much consideration for actually the local people of Sabah. I mean, I'm not taking away the accomplishments of Tun Fuad, Tun Mustafa. They played their part, but it seems that we were never able to actualize a Sabah that really embodies the idea of equal partnership. I think now Datuk Jeffrey is in the Dun saying that let's drop Chief Minister title, let's drop Negeri, and then let's adopt something else just to be distinct, right? Where does that lead us in this current situation now, in the modern Sabah, when it comes to status, and what should we be going for in terms to get to that idea of equal partnership?
Yeah, I don't dwell too much on polemics, whether our TYT should be, the Nagara or Negri, that kind of thing. It's just, to me, it's a waste of time. I think we should just focus on how to develop Sabah. So many years, we have to realize that we're an open society. Sabah is more open than Sarawak, okay? And you can see a lot of Sarawakians actually have businesses in Sabah. I've done my poll, all right? You go to all the coffee shops and all that. Of one row of 20 shops, maybe 70% are people from Sarawak, okay? So we have maintained this openly. Sarawakians came for timber and so on. So the reason I tell Lawrence about in Sarawak it's very difficult to do business because it's control. It's very much control. Licenses are controlled. But in Sabah, anybody can come in here and open business. You see the Indian shops flourishing. Every corner shops. In Kampong Lekas is operated by Indians or Pakistani or whatever. So we need to control our state better. Okay, put more professional people in, and put a proper administrative setup. So that all this can be controlled, especially environment and carbon trading, for example. Which is big money. Not leave it to certain groups of people or certain politics and all that. I mean, there should be a body that is not politically affiliated, but independent body that can advise the state, on giving inputs. I think Sabah has so many brains, but what we tapping on is political brains. Okay, meaning every time there's the election won, we give positions to politicians or people connected with politicians. We don't give it to a pool of good brains in Sabah. All right. And as I travel, I see many Sabahans working overseas, London or Europe. Okay. I met a restaurant manager in Ireland who's from Caningau. Now, I mean, why do they work overseas when they can come to Sabah and contribute, because we don't welcome them. We don't appreciate them. We don't want them, right? Because we just want to give it to a group of politicians only who are supporting the party and all that. So at the end of the day, you starve your state of quality intellectual people who can help move the state. I mean, only recently we see the chief minister appointing Tan Sri Andrew Cheng, for example, who is a well-known Sabahan financial expert, who's held high esteem in China and Hong Kong and financial markets and banking circles, but we don't recognize him. We never will bring him in and say, "Hey, come and help us." I mean, Mahathir did it. Previous government, federal government did it. They had brought in the Petronas ex Tan Sri Hasan Marikan. They brought Daim Zainuddin in and formed this council of advisors. All right. So Sabah is not lacking of council advisors, but we don't use them. All right, we don't appreciate them. In fact, we disown them.
We chase them out.
Chase them
basically.
out. Yeah.
And moving on from, because you talk about the sort of like an intellectual bankruptcy in Sabah, and one of your ways of counteracting that is the Sabah Literary Circle, which you had your maiden event the other day on the Sulu claim, and you said the goal of it was to promote literacy, to promote intellectual discussion in Sabah. And when you said that we put in people that are not professionals, we send a message to Sabah that intellectuals aren't valued at all in Sabah. So considering that message, I feel like in a lot of ways, Sabahans are not pursuing a lot of intellectual endeavors or enterprises. Of course, we have universities here and there, but the quality of publications and all that sometimes do leave much to be desired. So I'm going to ask you, Dato', what would be Sabahan intellectualism as you see based on this literary circle that you have cultivated?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we're not a literate society, okay? And I notice Sabahans are very emotional people, and we tend to just go off the cuff or fly off the handle, making statements when we should try to intellectualize what is the issue. 40% is a very good example, okay? So I'll talk about that a bit later. So I see that we don't have a platform, especially young people, to talk about this issue, whether it's a Sulu claim, the 40%, or the oil and gas things, where we just can come together as friends from different diverse backgrounds, sit around the table, have coffee, and talk about it, right? And move it to a direction where we can translate into actions, okay? So when I started writing, I noticed, like I mentioned earlier, even go to a popular bookstore here in Syria, my 3 books are there. I'm the only Sabahan, and all the rest are about Anwar Ibrahim, it's all West Malaysian centric topics and all that, glorifying themselves. So what is the Sabah story? I mean, my last book is to highlight events that has political, economic events, or social events that's affected Sabah and shape our history. And I think to develop a literate society, we need a platform such as the one I organized and gave birth to, Sabah Literary Society, a circle actually, and it's a joint collaboration with a esteemed government outfit, which is the library. The library is probably unheard of.
How many of you go to the library on average?
Yeah, they have a beautiful Tanjong Arun library, one of the great architectural wonders, and they do actually a lot of work in encouraging reading, writing, literacy, but still not at the level that I see that we should move to, because most of these books and all that are from KL, okay, KL-centric writers and so on. So I think we need to develop, first of all, a literate society like we had in Tanjung Aru, where we pick on a topic like the Sulu claim and to use that as a discussion topic subject to have a different sharing and opinions at the table. So it's not so much the topic of the Sulu claim, but behind that, talking about the authors. I mean, who are they? And why do they're so passionate about this topic? Why do they write about it? What documents they have? And so on. So we picked Shari as who's I would say one of the most esteemed historian in Sabah, but not recognized again. One of the foremost historian, all right? And me, I've checked him out and all that, and I find he's probably the most conversant person on this topic, right? So I brought him in as the first speaker and interviewed not so much the Sulu claim, but about him himself, right? So where was he born? Where was he born, for example? Simbulan, how did which school he went to, and how did he come to be interested in the Sulu claims and so on. And then we start from there. Then I give an opportunity to speak about the Sulu claim for a few 20 minutes or so, and then we open the floor to discussions. So I think we should have more of that open forum discussions. I think a lot of these organizations today are very politically focused and not people focused. I want this SLC to be more people focused, and really makes us find out what makes them tick, in terms of picking their own topics which they feel so close about. And I feel that we need to know these topics because people are asking us, what's the Sulu claim and all that, and like when I talked to Shari yesterday, there's people from overseas calling him to know more about, the mass media today is so effective that they can pick up straight away, all this and broadcast this issue. And also I've been the official from the Ministry of Unity, the federal Ministry of Unity, called me up yesterday to ask me to do a presentation on this Sabah Literary Society SLC that we formed because they know the state library already. They work with the state library, but suddenly they see the library has come alive with this new section or organization within. So we don't need to register ourselves because we already have two registered bodies. It's a collaboration between Sabah State Library and Borneo Historical the Society, which Chari leads. So we just part of it, all right? And we want to be the shakers and movers in this circle and bring history alive, Sabah topic alive, and sharing it and discussing it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk to the Unity Council in a bit.
Yeah.
But when it comes to you want to have high level conversations at times, right? When you go through material that you find inspiring. I know in KL it's easy. You can have a Gerak Budaya event. You have a lot of literary festivals over there that's going on. But at the same time, here in Sabah, is that I don't think Sabah in general, but I think there's a global phenomenon that there's now a literacy crisis going on. That's over time, the past few years, there's been a downward trend on people reading for luxury, right? So I want to focus just on the idea of reading, because you obviously are very well read. You love reading as well. How would we encourage more people to pick up reading as a luxury instead of always on the phone 24/7 where you watch videos and then 20 seconds later you completely forget what it said? Let's just talk about reading in general, because reading is supposed to be the first defense against fake news or false narratives. What would you say to that first?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we have to recognize in today's world, and the digital world as overtaking us, as opposed to taking a hard book and going through the pages. But trends, if you read trends, people are going back to reading paper books. All right. And I think trends are trends. They don't last very long. And people go back to the normal thing, like although we so modern, but we now appreciate like all the classic cars and so on.
All the music as well.
Music or what. We
I
go
probably
back.
listen to music from your
Yeah,
generation as well.
So it's not that we got rid of them. It's just that the certain phase of life we've gone through cycles, but then we come back to the same cycle. So literacy and all that reading is still very important. I mean, my recent trip to UK, shows that there is a growing trend of readership. And so coming to Sabah. One of the issues that we face is we are multilingual. So this emphasis on Bahasa as being a prominent language and all that. I attend all kinds of book exhibition. As a writer, of course, you participate in all this thing. Let me tell you my observation. The biggest one is the annual book festival there's so many book festivals. And the biggest one is in what call it super easy, Putra World Trade Center, that
Okay.
building. It attracts about 1 million people. Okay, a lot of young people. So you just walk through the exhibitions and then see what kind of topics they write about. They write about romance. They write about religious things. And topics about hantu. Okay.
That's always great.
So you worry what Malaysia is heading towards, when you see that these books are very sellable. They sell about 300 copies, 400 copies, okay? And they outsell me anytime. But you begin to wonder what kind of society we're developing. And they're also Bahasa literate, okay? And we're losing our proficiency in the English language. So I think there should be a balance between the two. But anyway, the topics that I observe is quite interesting. And when it comes to serious books, Gerak Budaya actually produce a range of very serious topics. And I love to go there and pick up, books that has literature about history, people, culture, and topics which is not thought of, but become a topic, and it enriches your perspective about the world we live in. So I think in Sabah, the tendency for us is we go to TikTok, we go to whatever media that we are so used to, especially the younger generation. But there's only a fleeting passage of your thoughts and all that. So when it comes to say like 40%, all right, we talk about 40%. Yeah, we know about 40%. Okay, tell me what's more what's different? Okay, and how do we go about it? I mean, how do we turn this 40% into something that can be delivered by federal government to us? Okay, I mean, but we have to understand where the 40% came from before the Constitution, right? Like when we formed Malaysia, what was the story about us, Sabahans, and who put in the 40%? Sarawak didn't put in the 40%. Why did the federal government agree to put that into the Constitution? All right, I mean, we never asked that. You should debate about it. Okay, the reason why. Okay, Park Leong, who claims to be the architect behind this, saying that they knew that down the road somehow we won't have enough income to govern the state. All right, basically a simple thing like we don't have money to run the state in future. And what is the best way to have a regular annual income is tax, because tax is forever. The oil will probably be expired in in 10 years' time, source of, our forest is gone, and so on. So what resources do you have? The only stable income, which I think is very brilliant, is a tax. Okay, because will have to pay tax forever. Right? Any country's tax is the income for the government. So sharing 40% tax is a brilliant idea. All right. So but nobody talks about the history, how we came about it. Because if we put that in a clear perspective, then we should tell the federal government, hey, we agreed to join or to form Malaysia based on its 40%. All right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to emphasize that.
And I think that strikes at a very, in a way, a very primordial point, because the cornerstone of intellectualism is curiosity. Is to always ask questions or to revisit particular narratives or perceptions we always have. But that aside, I think we can have another episode just on intellectualism itself. Let's talk about the Unity Council, Dato. You are appointed to it right now. Maybe you can tell, what does it actually mean? What does the council do? What is the purview of it? And what does it hope to achieve? Because you being there, you are now in a position where you can tell even more people, or even higher level people in the federal government, say, this is what Sabah wants, and should we want to pursue unity as a federation, this is what Sabah should be respected for. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's, you open a Pandora box there, because it's a very difficult topic to discuss unity, because there's no real definition of unity. I mean, I always start something with a definition, so I can make sure I don't run away from that perspective, or that concise statement of what unity is about.
Okay, maybe your definition of your personal definition.
Well, before I come to that, maybe I should just elaborate a bit more. So, basically the unity talk by unity came after the May the 13th riot. This is what is written there. So they decided that unity is an issue. So they formed various ministries or committees or all these years. So now today is the Ministry of Unity under Slovakian as a minister, Arundagang, and they have many programs. Okay, but I'm overwhelmed by the program, because I feel I'm lost into all these policies and programs that they think should or will include it into the unity agenda, right? But to me, it's complex, and people shy away from it is because they don't relate that policy to unity. To me, unity should be simple. I happen to bump into. I'm not shy to speak out. I mean, Tan Sri Lam Tai, who's been a unity committee for donkey years, he says, "Don't expect anything." I mean, so I that kind of comment. I mean, all right. So he's been there about 30 years on the unity, or various unity committee. Don't expect this any big ideas that you think it's got. To me, let me talk about the issue first. I'm frank. In the first meeting, the deputy prime minister Fadila chaired the meeting, and I specifically stated out, despite all your policies, the main issue still in Malaysia is race and religion. We don't have the royalty issue because we don't have Agong. Right? We respect the Agong. I mean, when he came here, we gave him
Everyone celebrated.
much love. It was like a celebrity, right? So race and religion is still an issue, and it's not being tackled in the front. All right, we hidden behind all kinds of agendas and all that. So when it comes to unity, I don't really have a real definition of unity, but I just show it by example. People like you and me, sitting around a table, whether it's coffee shop or whatever environment, sitting down, talking nicely, and debating, arguing about politics of the day or what, and then having a good cuppa or meal, and then without disagreement or agreement, we go home
Mhm.
happily, right? And then we meet again and repeat the same thing. To me, I don't want to box myself in a definition, but to me, it's people to people interactions, respecting each other, which Sabah and Sarawak is probably the best example in Malaysia. Uh, Respecting your religion and all that. I mean, we always say that we can come to a Chinese coffee shop, Muslims or another or people eating pork in front of you, and you're a Muslim. It doesn't offend us because we are so used to this culture. Okay, you eat what you want. We order what we want because then in that shop maybe there's a soto stall, there's a char siu stall, and so on. But it doesn't bother us, but it bothers people there in Peninsular Malaysia, and that gets me. Right? Because they become more close now, a closed society rather than open society. You see that in newspaper every day. The small things sparks off certain things. I mean, and the media to me doesn't do a good job either. We highlight things which is minuscule and then blow it up into a big issue. All right. So I think in uh, my caution is that don't take it for granted like in the Sabah and Sarawak, because I can see now with a flux of different cultures coming in, ideas coming in, we maybe um, probably be influenced by these kind of things, right?
Okay, I mean, I feel like a lot of the conversation has been a bit of, I don't know, doom and gloom here and there. Things are not seem so positive. But Dato, you back to Unity Council. Even though you said the environment's very complex, you have easier access than most people to see the things that the Madani government is doing. So maybe you can tell us, is there anything you can see that the Madani government is doing well based on your perspective on being on that council? Is there anything that they've been doing right so far compared to previous governments?
Well, every government, as you know, they comes up with their slogan and all that. Okay, like Najib's time, one
Malaysia.
Malaysia, or Keluarga Malaysia, under siapa tu, forgot which prime minister. Anyway, each prime minister have their own slogans. Even Madani government also had their own slogan. And they peddle it, okay? So it become a fashion for each prime minister to come up with some kind of policy regarding unity or how we see um, the government should be or want to be, But, all these slogans and all that over the years, what happened? I mean, they disintegrate. It's only some kind of nice wordings, but in reality, the same thing as I said, earlier, goes back to race and religion again. Not so much in Sabah and Sarawak, but in Peninsular Malaysia. But it's affecting the whole nation. I keep telling people, we should not ignore that. Okay, some people, my friends, say, the one Peninsular Malaysia only, doesn't happen. But remember, Malaysia now is well known internationally. BBC picks us up. CNN picks us up. The moment Akmal burns a flag, it goes to BBC. It goes to CNN. It goes to South China Morning Post. Okay, I can prove it. I have documents that all this media pick it up. So we are caught in some kind of crosswinds, okay, of this race and religion issue, and we have nothing to do with it. All right. But then the problem with us, as I say, our politicians, we are reactive. We're not proactive. We react to certain situation that has happened. If Akmal burns a flag, for example, we react to it. But we don't be proactive in transmitting our our beautiful culture, tolerance, and so on. We have failed to do that. We are reactive to what is happening in Malaysia. But I think we should turn it around and then be proactive. Go over there and tell our story, which we have not been doing, right? I mean, on Malaysia Day, I've been in KL, all right? Empty streets. It's public holiday. Nothing to celebrate. But in here, we have the Prime Minister coming, giving speeches, 10,000 people, 20,000 people, and we only celebrate Malaysia Day here. There has no significance, right?
I mean, over here, there seems to be more fanfare over Merdeka than Malaysia Day sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's
It's something that I think if I'm a unity advisor, we should have only one national day, not two.
mhm.
The same flags on Merdeka Day, it left over into the weather for 16 days and comes faded, and then it carry over to Malaysia Day. Is it shameful? Malaysia Day should have more prominence.
No, I definitely
Yeah.
agree. I mean, these are very heavy topics, Dato'. So maybe you can end it on I would say a lighter note. So, and maybe a personal question with you, because you wrote a trilogy of books already, right?
Yeah.
Are you planning on preparing for another book?
Yeah, I'm
And what's it going to be about?
working on my fourth book. I wish I can write about interesting story, romance or some but I'm not that kind of writer. So I'm
You never know.
fourth book, yeah, maybe. But the fourth book is I'm trying to go. I always a thinking person, okay, and I very reflective person. And as I grow older, I don't react to incidents in anger and all that. I try to reason, try to find out why this is happening. For example, now I'm writing about the different ideology that defines us as Malaysia. For example, when Akmal takes on this to with this shop on about this Allah socks. I mean, the police confirm it's only about a dozen socks, so it became a big issue, taken the world by storm. I mean, it's the world press is the same. Also, they love this kind of stories. Or 4 socks in Malaysia, and then 10 shops burned down, and Islam is like this. Extremists. And Malaysia is like this now. It's become an Islamic nation. And so, but what makes Akmal ticks? Who is the people supporting him? Or what kind of people supporting him? Okay, so I'm writing more to as to broaden the second book I wrote about the social
contract.
Okay, and trying to explain the context much clearly. So I'm going deeply into the ideology of Malaysia. Okay, how it originates. So just in simple terms, I'll explain to you. The ideology of the Malay Federation basically is UMNO. They've been the ruling party.
Malay nationalism.
Malay nationalism. What was Malay nationalism? Okay, so the basis to me is the social contract. That's the bedrock of the thinking and their rights to. And I'm still debating with a lot of people. They say this social contract does not exist. True, it's not in written form. It's a complex topic, it takes a long time to explain. But a lot of these things are written in the Article 153 of the Constitution. Malay rights, Malay privilege, religion, and protection of rulers. So whatever in these non-written social contracts, that to me is embedded already in Article 153 of the Federal Constitution and other articles also related to that. Okay, so but that's the Constitution, but the ideology, ketuhanan Melayu, the social contract, and other Malay nationalism and all that. This is what has formed among the Malay elites, okay? And they've trumpeted this over the course of their policies and actions. And today is still the same.
Yeah.
You know, whether you turn the flag upside down and hang it there, it becomes this issue. And the argument is always Malay rights, you know, religious, you infringe my religion and so on. And that's the narrative for Malaysia. And we are on a defensive all the time. We're not part of it. We don't feel like that, but we, why are we always on the defensive? Right. So then I go into this research. What is our philosophy as Borneo and Sabah Sarawak? You know, why we are not associated with that kind of thinking, right? What is the basis? There is quite clear. I mean, it starts with Melayu and religion, Islam. Okay, you can't separate both. But here, our history is different, right? So we have tribal beliefs, animism, and so on, and then Islam, or the Sulu influence, Islam, but the Sulu influence was not so much religion. So I'm quite surprised also, and I mean, it's more territorial fights rather than religious fights, and basically what I'm saying is the emphasis is not so much religion as compared to Peninsula Malaysia. I know where Islam is, and they make sure that in all our negotiation, there is this element of religion. If you look at all the negotiation between even the Cobbold Commission, the main concern is religion, isn't it? Okay, if you look at the 20 points, the first point is freedom of religion, right? So in our discourse and negotiation with them, religion plays an important role. And we have compromised in a sense that, yes, we accept Islam as the official religion, but we have the right to practice other religions. So religion and race plays an important part. And then people still forget, where's Anwar from? He's UMNO. Nearly all the prime ministers have that UMNO
exclusively
DNA.
UMNO DNA. Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that the DNAs come from UMNO, and UMNO is from UMNO. So
and arguably most political parties have UMNO DNA, some form or
exactly.
another.
So they have splinter groups basically. So the DNA is that. So the political party survive on race and religion, and that is they're propagating all the time to keep them in power.
And then maybe I can.
So I mean that's basically my research now, and basically at the end of the day, I'm saying you have to appreciate the different ideologies. Don't be so reactive. Know what happens there. You try to understand them, and maybe have a dialogue with them and saying that why do we have to be based on race and religion? Can we talk about culture and other things?
And be the courage to say that, oh, this is a Malay idea, this is not exactly a Borneo idea. But maybe just a food for thought is that before we end, that maybe, like you said, a philosophy of Borneo has to be formed out of a resilience from all these external ideologies, because the whole point of ideology is to embed itself into the subconscious until it becomes natural for the individual to actualize it. But I think I always believe that for Sabah and Sabah identity is always one where it was formed out of resilience and resistance from external factors, Brunei, British, and now Malaya. But conversation for another day. But I think that ends this episode. We have Dr. Jo Samad here. Very heavy topics, very thought-provoking topics, I would say. But if you enjoy the things that Dr. Jo has said or written, you can always purchase his books here. Which bookstores can they
At the moment, in Sabah Sarawak, it's popular bookstores. But in KL, it's Kinokuniya bookstore.
Okay.
KLCC, yeah.
So Kinokuniya, if you are in West Malaysia, over here, popular bookstore, you can find it. I also found it several times there. It's great read, and I think it'll be great food for thought for anybody that is trying to sort of increase their understanding or increase their capacity for understanding when it comes to Sabah issues. So thank you so much, Dato',
Thank you
for
very much, Adit,
coming
for
here today.
having me.
We'll have you
It's a
hopefully
pleasure.
again in the future.
Yeah, thank you.